You have the biographies of the speakers in the conference handbook, so I'm not intending to take time away from them by going through those in extenso. I would just simply like to invite now two people who need really no introduction at all, because they are the conveners of this conference, Andrea Nanetti and Cheong Siew, to give their talk to the panel under the title of Interactive Global Histories and the Maritime Space, 1205 to 1533. So Andrea and Cheong.
Good morning. We keep on being on stage, but not to bother you. So we invited you and we convened you here in this 3-day conference because we want to learn from you. And now, if we take time to present our project, is because we need help. We will present you what we have been working here since 2013, and we would like to engage each of you in your special field of expertise in collaborating to this endeavor. Interactive Global Histories and the Maritime Space 1205-1533 is a project that started in 2013 when Siew and I, in collaboration with Misha Filipov, a PhD student at NTU, School of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, went to present our work, which was our proposal, at the Culture and Computing Conference in Kyoto. We start from the team, me and Angelo, who is here today. He's the next speaker. We started the collaboration with Angelo last year when we got the first grant from Microsoft Research, and we started to work on maps as knowledge aggregators in order to enrich and maybe help to develop the algorithm of Bing search. Cheong Siew is our main collaborator at Microsoft Research when we started in 2013. He works in data mining and in knowledge mining. His main project now is called Rouge, and you can find it on the Microsoft web. We started to engage other scholars at Microsoft, and we had quite a good result this month because in the world tour of Microsoft Research Outreach, when Dr. Anandan came to Singapore, decided to make a stop here, NetADM, in order to discuss what we are calling, and I think I told it to many of you, what we are calling heritage science, a new science at the intersections of, in brackets, digital humanities and data science. So I put in bracket digital because we don't really need to say that we live in a digital world, but what does it imply is something else. Why a science? Because we would like to get into a formal science of heritage. And the other one in the collaboration is Siew, who is here with me today. And we started this project when we first met in 2013 at the Complexity Conference. And we were introduced by Jan Fassbinder. And I don't know if he is happy or not now, because since then, we started to ask him funding and funding and funding for conference and research. So I don't know if he is happy to have introduced each other or not. But anyway, you did, and it happened, and here we are. We started from the big picture, so saying how we can move from the tree to the labyrinth in heritage studies. We all know that knowledge and values are embedded in different artifacts because these were the media of previous generations. They embedded their knowledge and values in sculptures, in monuments, in books, in the landscape, in any kind of object touched by humans. We have a certain kind of human experience embedded and embodied. How can we use it, take advantage of it? I wouldn't say preserve and conserve, because life and death are the same thing, you know. And we know that if we proceed towards the loss of almost all we have. And the whole point is what we have in the present that might be inherited in the future is our duty. Working on it, which is the key that we assumed as a base, is an interdisciplinary collaboration in between technologies and humanities. But how to do it? How to do it is a big question, because we know that easy to say interdisciplinary, quite difficult to conceive it, usually doesn't work, and at the end we need to go back to our disciplines. So we know that we are in a very slippery field, because interdisciplinary usually means you need to face a double load of work. You need to go on your discipline, as Johan and I are doing. He is going on in his research, I'm going on in mine, Angelo the same, Cheong Siew the same in Beijing, and other scholars in Redmond at the same time. On top of it, we have recurrent and more frequent meetings in which we work together. We write paper, we organize conferences like this one, and we engage scholarship. The beginning, as have been mentioned many times here, is the first Singapore Heritage Science Conference, which happened here in January 2014. It was opened by a very inspiring talk by Helga Novotny, former president of the European Research Council from ETH Zurich. Helga will be here next year as visiting professor, and we are very happy to go on with the collaboration again. After that, as said, we worked on this heritage science at the intersection of digital, humanities, and data science. What are the data here? So data are the data, which we use the acronym Treasure of Human Experiences. These are our data. About the paper, we are quite happy, because coming back to Jan that funded our trip to Kyoto, we could tell him, so we got the best paper award. We couldn't do better. So, and after that, of course, we asked for more funding, and we went on with the other conferences. But now, going to the Maritime Space, here you have the quote of what you can find on your conference booklet. In David Nabulafia's talk, is still the idea that studying maritime spaces will enable one to break free from the national histories, extolling the achievement of particular peoples and dynasty. And it has an attraction in an age of globalization. So obviously we saw in the sea the network to write a new maritime history, and maybe to write a new history for a new age. We saw the scalability of the project, and we picked up a database that I started when I was at Princeton in 2007, but in these few years we really dramatically changed it. We moved from an older platform in which we use the WordPress open source into Azure platform, and we are empowering the database and the analytics that we can run into that platform. One meeting that we had here, always at the Complexity Conference, was with Mary Gelman, and when he was speaking about history, about how to work on history, he told us something very simple, but you know, when something very simple is told you by a Nobel Prize, you listen at it maybe carefully. And he was saying, yes, you're working on history, on global history, and you are a Byzantinist by training. Why don't you go back to Toynbee, who started from Byzantine history? And of course, it has many mistakes, many things need to be fixed, but we could give a try in working and fixing these kind of things. So we worked to this time period that we chose, 1205, 1533, which I focused on when I was at Princeton at the very beginning, thinking which could be an advanced time period to study the Maritime Space, interactive global histories, to work on a new kind of history. And I chose this period for several reasons. Let's start from the data. Just enough, but not overwhelming data, in which you can do almost everything, you can test almost everything, and you can be sure that you can collect not everything, but quite a good amount of information. Other reasons in the historical field are in the East and in the West at the same time. First of all, for my main source, because I started to work on it from a very specific point of view, which is Venice. And I started to work on the view on the world as seen from Venice, using Venetian diaries and Venetian chronicles. And the time period for Venetian chronicles is 1205-1533, but not only. So 1205 is the first year of the establishment of the Latin Empire in Constantinople after the Crusader conquest of the Byzantine Empire. It is the very beginning of the, we could say, the colonial establishment as a program in which Christian nations from the West went and conquered other Christian nations in the East. It was a dramatic change in the history of relationship of in between East and West Mediterranean. On the same year, incidentally, just incidentally, we had just Genghis Khan starting to conquer village by village on his way to the West. On one side, we have Western nations started to conquer step by step on their way to the East. And on the other side, to the West. One of the most interesting points, here you have a Wikipedia picture based on Abu Lughdo 1989 word systems. It's not perfect, but it can give you an idea of the 13th century word systems. The idea that came out from these East and West interconnections is that the winning solution was the one that used the sea and not the one that used the land. In this world system, you can see that most of them are sea-based. Only one is land-based. It's the one that was developed during the Yuan dynasty in the Mongol period, the one that developed the first intercontinental continuous connectivity between East and West using one way and one belt. On this note, we moved to cartography. And that's why we wanted Angelo, because we didn't want just to go to the library and browse books, but we wanted to use map like this one, like the 1457 map of the world, which is in the National Library in Florence now, and to have the world experts that made the critical editions of those maps. And we wanted to work on the 1457 map and on the Fra Mauro map of the world. And of course, Angelo Cattaneo is the right person to invite. And we invited him, and he was very friendly with us. He accepted the collaboration, and it was the beginning of a beautiful experience. And I'm quoting Angelo because I would like to involve each of you in this project according to your field of expertise. With Angelo, the idea is where can we go to present this project that we have? And we decided for top-level international venues. We decided for Jinan, the quinquennial meeting of the historians. We decided for Rio de Janeiro, which is the biennial meeting of the Cartography Society. And we decided for Singapore for the triennial meeting of the Asian Association of World Historians. In the three meetings, we had very, very good feedback. And so we can say that we are inviting you to a winning adventure and not to a losing one. So. And here is from where I started, from the world as seen from Venice, publishing the critical edition of the Morosini Chronicle. And if you read the reviews of this critical edition in German, in English, in modern Greek, Italian, French, and a few other languages, you find what you could see as a negative note, which is the index at the end. So it is a 3 million word thing. And at the end, I have a 400 pages index, which stopped at a certain point in 423, even if the chronicle goes till 433. And it is where the reviewers pointed their finger. But I think because they didn't read the introduction, in which I explained why I was doing that. But it happens in reviewers many, many times. And the point was that this index was the proof, the draft for an informatization of the data. Because I didn't want simply to index something and to have something to browse the chronicle, but I wanted to find the way to migrate the information and the knowledge, the word knowledge embedded in that chronicle, to migrate it into another medium. And it is what we call, by definition, mapping, getting information from a set of data and migrating them into another set. And coming here, of course, I was exposed to the East. And we were lucky to meet Jeff Waite, who made the translation of the Ming Shi-lu Chronicles. The Ming Shi-lu Chronicles are now embedded in the Engineering Historical Memory project on Azure, and we would like to have you helping us in getting the traditional Arab chronicles inside it. We are already working on the Malay document that we have. We would like to embed Persian chronicles, and we would like to go on with other maps. And of course, not only texts, but we would like to go in archaeology, land and underwater. And we were very much inspired by John Miksich's work on the Silk Road of the Sea, which is not only a book, but it is the collection of everything that archaeologically happened here around in the last 30 years. It is a gazetteer of everything you can find. And of course, we would like to migrate this data from the book into a digital platform. This we can skip it. It's just from where started the link to complexity, but it is a way to introduce Siew. The first time that I met complexity was in Venice, when David Avralane introduced me to Sander van der Leuve. And I gave a seminar to Sander and to David, with just the three of us, speaking, telling them the failure of my indexing of the Venetian diaries, of the Moroccan Chronicle. And they were telling me it's not a failure, it's the very beginning of your acquaintance with complexity. So, please.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. So I'll carry on from where he left here, and that is on how we bring in a complexity science perspective into the project. So let's, I think everyone here agrees that human society is complex. Yes? Yes, okay, good. Because if we talk to engineers, they will think that engineered systems are not so complex, because if you drive a car, you turn the steering wheel right, the car goes right. It doesn't suddenly go left, as if it has a mind of its own. A car doesn't have a mind of its own. Human societies often have minds of their own, obviously to the dismay of the rulers. So if emperors want the society to do certain things, and they will frequently decide to do something else. So, but the question is, how does this kind of complexity present itself in the data that is left in historical records, and how do we extract them back to build up the picture of it qualifying as a complex system? So we start from the kind of data set that Andrea has, and so after talking to Andrea, I realized that in the sciences, we frequently talk about an electron being able to tunnel through a potential barrier and get through to the other side when it is actually classically forbidden. So there is an actor in that sentence, and there is an action in that sentence, but there is frequently this is I guess what humanities would call an incomplete narrative, because we frequently want to have two parties, or at least two or more parties, and then there must be a place, there must be a time, that the place may be important, the time may be important, whereas in the sciences frequently a lot of these things are just thrown away. So humans I guess for a very long time, through our prehistoric history to modern history, we understand events in the past unfolding in time in terms of stories. So we know that that is true because we write stories about the past. We actually create operas about the past, and we write poems about the past. And in fact, movies, modern Hollywood movies are also about stories. Some of them, of course, too, is chock full of computer graphics, animations, and therefore there's no story. But no, of course, we realize that after we left the cinema and we feel empty inside. But after watching a good movie, of course, you feel that you've learned something. And how do we learn from historical text data? And we want to first organize them in terms of narratives. So these are the basic narrative elements. It consists of the 6 W's: who, what, when, where, why, how. And how do we do that from the kind of records that that's presented, that Andrea presents to me? So I look at the kind of records in the Venetian diaries. These are all in paragraph form. So what happens is that the Morosini would interview a sailor that came back from India or China and then ask him about what is notable on his journeys, and he would just record it down. He may say that, okay, Ming China is having a war with a tribe somewhere in Vietnam or whatever, and then when that happened, where did that happen, he will record all these down. So what you should imagine here is, I think this is the laser. So this is one paragraph of record, and there are lots of these kind of records in the Morosini Codex and other diaries, and we will convert this into a complex network that looks like this. So the circles are actors that is described in the records, and the lines joining them are relationships between the actors, where we take it for simplicity purposes. We take red to mean war, green to mean trade, and blue to mean treaty. But of course, we can construct a network like this by going through the entire record, and then what we will obtain is called a time-integrated network. So this can show power blocks that remain fairly stable over time, but it doesn't tell us very much, so we need to go on a bit more further to do time-resolved analysis. So this is the same backbone network. Okay, so this is the network that is obtained from going through all the records. And then after that, we will examine in successive sliding time, overlapping time windows, which of these links get activated. So these are inactive links, so they don't light up. And this is an active link, so they light up. So this is for a particular period in time. Can be half a year long, can be a year long, can be several years long. And then after that, it will be followed by, say, this link being active, and then these sets of links being active, and so on and so forth. Now, if we understand the historical events in terms of these kind of complex networks, we realize that we can discover key periods in the history of that we're dealing with by examining successive time windows. For example, we started off with a complex network like this with 2 links activated, and then the next time window we will find that a lot more links are activated, and then it quietens down. And therefore we can then single this period out as a key period. So that means there's a lot of things happening. So it might be a revolution, might be an epidemic, but something important might be happening, and the social fabrics of the time may actually be unraveling, and therefore the expert, the human expert, which is the historian, will need to then take a closer look at the records and to see what particularly important is going on. So key periods are always characterized by high intensity of events. So I guess the expert historians would know that when you study historical records, it's not that you get a constant, uniform, intense level of intensity of events, but you usually get a lot of this kind of event in a very short time when the time is important. So we tested that out with a partial set of records. So this is a period from May 1409 to October 1409. So just look at the kind of links that are drawn. So this is a key period because it's the most intense within this period, and then after that, you can see it dying out. So you see frequently, if you go through analysis like this, you will see levels of activity rising and then falling off, then rising again and falling off, and that allows us to actually demarcate different periods in history. Okay, now they're using a slightly different methodology. We can also discover key events in the records. So this is, say, for a particular time window, you find that these sets of red links are activated, so these are wars. And then after that, a blue link is activated, so it's clear what is happening here. So B is waging a war against 3 enemies. And obviously, it's unlikely that in a single nation is capable of holding off against 3 other nations. So it forms a treaty with another nation, and then this leads to, so in order to mobilize its resources to help H, B then needs to recruit resources from the people who are friendly with it. So this basically what we find is a series of events that's converging on a particular actor, and then after that, a series of events that's diverging from another actor. So this allows us to identify this particular event as a key event. So the signing of a treaty at this time is a key event that distinguishes it from the rest of the more mundane events. So again, we tested it out using the data set that's available to us. Here we see the Ottoman Empire at war with the Gigatai, and Tartaria, which the Mongols are trading with Venice. Venice is trading with Rome. Rome is trading with the Ottomans. And Tartaria went to war against the Gigatai, and some trading patterns stopped. And now you see that the pattern has changed. And the event that triggered all is actually the Ottoman Empire going to war against the Mongols. And that particular event is actually the sacking of the marketplace at Crimea. So these kind of automatic narratives methodology allows us to quickly go through a very large data set to identify potentially interesting events for the human expert, the historian, to look at. We are not saying here that these are the only kinds of key events that are possible. We have not yet done a more systematic study going through the entire data set to see whether we can find other kinds of key events, other kinds of signatures of key periods. And once you identify these 2, then the key actors are clear, the key places are clear, and the key timings are clear. Okay, and of course, we still have to understand why they do it. That's a separate story altogether. Okay, so let me just quickly then go on to the next, the remaining part of our talk. So this is the Mauro's map. Andrea has shown this before. This is the world effectively seen from the perspective of, from the vantage point of Venice. Now, the key thing we want to highlight here is that this map here is not meant for navigation purposes. You wouldn't sail through the Mediterranean and then through the Red Sea and then through the Indian Ocean by carrying a map like this. First of all, it's impossible. This map is several meters by several meters big, so it's not easy to carry it onto a ship, and it's definitely not easy to orient themselves. The sailors of the time actually could navigate without a map totally. So this map serves a separate purpose. It is meant to actually, and Angela will tell us more about that. Actually, it is an aggregation of all the knowledge that is known about the world till that date, and presented in a visual form. That is the map. So let us talk a little bit about the knowledge hierarchy. So this was, okay, so the reference is being covered up, but this is called the Data Information Knowledge Wisdom Model, where you start by collecting data on the surround our environment, and then you process these to make them become information, and eventually they, if you distill them enough, they become knowledge, and finally wisdom. So this is the hierarchy that's proposed by some people in the knowledge engineering community. So data are merely symbols that we associate with the outside world. Information would be relationship between data, and then knowledge would involve proceduralized knowledge, information that we can act on and use to solve problems. And wisdom is, of course, knowing when to act. So we do not always need to act. Let me skip this fancy picture and just go on to talk about the limitations of Mauro's map. Now, with traditional media, you have this very big problem. The moment you finish the map, it becomes outdated. Okay, you cannot add anything to it, so no updating is possible, and it presents very few perspectives on the world. It reflects the interest and creator and of the creator and the sponsor. The sponsor in this case was the King of France. Yeah, and there's no.
Venice.
The what?
Venice.
Okay, the government of Venice. Okay, and there's no enhancement of user experience. So we imagine what could actually be done with digital maps. Except that digital maps are not doing the kind of things that for Mauro's map is doing. So this is Bing Map, this is, no, that was Google Maps, and this is Bing Maps, and then of course this is Google Earth. And these maps are always work in progress, so they are always being updated. And the old information, of course, can be stored in timelines, but they are not yet knowledge aggregators. Because there are no narratives you can find in them like you find in Wikipedia, but it is actually a natural next step. And we envision that there can be potentially this next step, and we envisage that it will be like actually a digital Silk Road, where you start with a map-like interface. You do a search, let's say on Kowloon, and then it will show you all the news that is, all the things that might interest you in Kowloon. Okay, so the moment you log in and you search for Kowloon, the interface will not know whether you're interested in the protest or in the shopping. So you present you with choices. And then you can choose. So if you choose, let's say, if you choose, if you choose to search for the protest, then it may bring you to a separate, a more refined search where it can show you, say, events that were leading up to the protest itself. And the thing that we envisage is possible is that after millions of users use this interface, we not only learn how to better organize the data and the information, we learn something about the users themselves. So we know that, let's say, a Hong Kong user will probably go one way, and then maybe a user from US would go another way, and a user from Japan would go yet another way. So we understand that the users can then be organized into different cultures. And this is useful because we can actually force a user to go from his home culture to a very different culture. It will be a very unsettling experience because you find that it's not natural. And maybe this is the way that we can use to learn how to think in other cultures. So I now give the time back to Andrea to conclude.
Oh, just a few seconds to say the conclusions which links us not only to what the other speakers will say in this talk, but to today's talks and mainly tomorrow's talks. Working on maritime heritage and complexity, we want to look at the future as well. And of course, we cannot predict the future. But we cannot collect enough data in order to understand where certain solutions will bring us. And first of all, we will need to learn where we are and from where we start from. And that's why as much data we can collect from the treasure of human experiences, as much good information we can have in order to predict future trends. And key questions, and I close with this, is something like that: what's next? You have the two examples of the so-called Silk Road. Or in another very different note is peace is never granted. What's next? Collaboration or conflict? So these are the main questions on which we are working on. And we would like to have all of you, most of you, to collaborate with us, with your field of expertise, with your specific sources that you are working on, with your specific data. Thank you very much.